Hi, my name is Charles Traylor. I'm an architect, and if you've been watching my previous videos, you'll know that I'm the general manager of Archline.com, which is a wide area network of architects and engineers who come together on an as-needed basis on the internet to provide Revit and AutoCAD working drawings for other architects and engineers around the United States. We've produced over 1,000 projects for over 150 firms in over half the states in the country. When I was visiting with you about my last video, I had shut down my firm in Dallas and had gone over to Honolulu to work for Media 5, which was a firm that had about 120 people and specialized in hospitality projects. And I was working as a contract project manager on high-rise hotels and high-rise office buildings in the Hawaiian Islands. And I'd probably continued in that activity indefinitely, except the Gulf War broke out in 1991, and the United States was pressuring Japan to help pay for the cost of the war because Japan was almost entirely dependent upon Mideast oil. Japan didn't want to pay for it, and so that developed into a diplomatic rift between the two countries. And the consequence of that is that Japan, who had been sending droves of their citizens over to Hawaii as tourists and real estate investors, just suddenly dried up. Almost overnight, there's no tourism to Hawaii, no real estate investors, it's just dead. Now the consulting project management client that I had in my Texas, Hawaii projects dried up, and my wife, Corinne, and I started running out of money. Fortunately, I was beginning to hear news from Texas that their economy was coming back and the recession was pretty much over. And we finally reached a tipping point where we decided to leave Hawaii and go back to Texas. I wanted to resume being in business, but I no longer wanted to work as an architect of record. So I decided to try my hand at what the old Farts Club at the Bishop Street Cafe had visualized, and that was to become proficient and to offer AutoCAD working drawings for other architects. I started using the internet about 1993 or thereabouts. By that time, I had about a half a dozen or so contract collaborators around Dallas moonlighting for me. Graphics reproduction was still primitive by today's standards, but we used it as best we could. Facsimile transmissions, of course, had been around by that time for several years, but that was all small format, 8.5 by 11. It was difficult to impossible or costly to go back and forth between large format paper graphics and electronics. We were able to plot large format graphics in black and white, but not color. And we couldn't transmit such data over my US Robotics modem because we had to locate one of these modems at either end of each connection, and they cost $1,000, and none of my collaborators could afford to buy one. So I did what I could with what I had. I'd collect manually produced large format paper red lines and other markups from my architect clients. I'd take everything to a local Kinko's store for copying as many times as I had collaborators. And then I'd line the collaborators up by anywhere from 6 to 12 at a time each night. They'd come over and in half-hour meetings would get lined out on what each of them respectively had to do for their assignments on the projects I was working on for my architect clients. All these large format copies that they picked up from me were black and white. There was no color because we just didn't have that available. So it was impossible to tell which part of the copies were part of the original documents and which were part of the red lines. So I distributed the black and white copies anyway, and when there were perceptible problems, I'd get on the phone and use my red line original to help my collaborators understand what we needed to do to respond to the red lines. During the next several videos, I'll continue with a prehistory of Archline, continuing up to the date that we formally established Archline CAD Services Ltd. And in the meantime, be sure to look out for my next email and video link. If you think that you'd like for us to be in touch with each other about doing business together, you can give me a call at 214-304-2850 or send me an email at archline@archline.com. Contact me anytime, day or night. I work around the clock, 24/7, 365.